So that's what they've put out there. One law enforcement source I talked to said, if you don't want to be associated with the gang, you're not going to wear the indicative clothing, you're not going to hang out with them. This is the report of the police department from 2019.
So, Shannon, they need to put up or shut up in court. Let me read you, and I brought it with me. I want to read you what Judge Zinnes of the Federal District Court just found on April 16th. She said that they had presented, quote, no evidence.
Senator Van Hollen has shown a level of bravery and leadership this week that I honestly wish every Democrat in Congress could channel, especially right now. We're facing a moment where Donald Trump is attacking the very foundation of our Constitution. And it doesn't matter what anyone thinks about the optics or messaging around how Democrats handle immigration issues. This is not the time for focus groups or carefully crafted talking points. This is about standing up against a clear violation of a man's human rights. Plain and simple. That's the argument. That's the focus. And Senator Van Hollen clearly understands that. He went on Fox News this morning and made that exact point straight to a host who very clearly regretted having him on as he tore through her defense of Trump with facts and conviction. We're going to break it all down in a moment. But before we do, if you haven't already, please give this video a like. And if you enjoy our channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps and means a lot. All right, now let's watch Senator Van Hollen shut it down on Fox.
So that's what they've put out there. One law enforcement source I talked to said, if you don't want to be associated with the gang, you're not going to wear the indicative clothing, you're not going to hang out with them. This is the report of the police department from 2019.
So, Shannon, they need to put up or shut up in court. Let me read you, and I brought it with me. I want to read you what Judge Zinnes of the Federal District Court just found on April 16th. She said that they had presented, quote, no evidence linking Abrego Garcia to MS-13 or to any other terrorist activity, unquote. If they've got evidence, you put it before the court. Don't spread it all over social media if you don't think it can stand the test of court scrutiny. They're trying to change the subject. The subject, as you said, was they are disobeying the court order, and they admitted themselves in court that he'd been wrongfully abducted and taken to El Salvador. Instead of fixing the problem, they fired the lawyer.
Well, he's on suspension, and I did ask the Attorney General about that.
They upbraided him.
Okay, so this finding, though, was accepted by an immigration judge. Determined in April of 2019, says the determination that the respondent is a gang member appears to be trustworthy and is supported by other evidence in the record. And then from there was, in December of 2019, on appeal, the Board of Immigration Appeals also said the immigration judge appropriately considered allegations of gang affiliation against the respondent in determining that he has not demonstrated that he is not a danger to property or persons. And in that proceeding, legal proceeding, the burden is on him to prove that. And the judge, the appeal, both say he didn't do it, and they believe the evidence they saw from police.
As you say, and you just indicated that, they never affirmatively found that he was a member of MS-13. They never, of course, charged him with any crime. And what the judge ultimately did in the immigration case was say that his life would be at risk from other gangs, if he was returned to El Salvador, which is why he got a work permit, which is why the members of his union, the sheet metal workers, are demanding his return. You know, you don't get a work permit if you are not legally in the country at the time.
He wasn't legally here. We agree to that.
No,
he's never legally been here.
He came at age 16, right, with his family, and no one's contested the fact that he fled El Salvador because they were afraid of gang violence. And then he came to the United States, and in 2019, the courts found that to send him back to El Salvador would put his life at risk. And the Trump administration did not appeal that decision, which is why he got a work permit and why he's working to raise his 3 kids. So let's be really clear that the fundamental issue right now is the fact that the Trump administration is ignoring court orders. And if you deny one person their constitutional rights, you threaten the constitutional rights of everybody. I can't understand why conservatives, or certainly libertarians, would accept the idea that someone can be deprived of their liberty without due process.
Did you ask him if he has any association with MS-13?
I did not ask him directly because he's answered that question repeatedly, as his lawyers have. My purpose in going there was to, number one, see if he was alive, see if he was healthy, take his story, as I said, they have litigated this case on MS-13, and it was the judge in the most recent case who says, put up or shut up. So that's what I say to President Trump and others, put up or shut up.
Hearing these reports from Prince George's County Police and from the immigration judge and the appeals court in the immigration setting, do you worry, though, that you are sticking your neck out for somebody who maybe down the line is proven to be connected to MS-13?
I want to be very clear. I'm not vouching for the man. I'm vouching for the man's rights, his constitutional rights to due process. And the proper place to litigate that is in the courts. And the most recent federal district court judge that looked at this, Judge Zinnes, said that the administration had presented no evidence of his connection to MS-13 or, by the way, to any other criminal gang or terrorist activity.
Okay.
So, again, all the issues you raised, why aren't they presenting those to the courts? So, again, put up or shut up in court, which is where we litigate these things.
Okay, so you know that there's been a lot of attention on two Maryland women who are angel moms in the sense that no connection to Mr. Garcia at all, but in two separate cases involving people who were in the U.S. and in Maryland illegally violently raped and killed their daughters. This is Patty Morin, the mother of Rachel Morin, one of your constituents.
And to have a senator from Maryland who didn't even acknowledge or barely acknowledged my daughter and the brutal death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen.
So a lot of questions there. First of all, who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes, like every other trip like the trip Kristi Noem took with her fashion show before CCOT, like the trip that 5 Republican members of the House took, like the day before when they went into CCOT. I can tell you, so yes, it was an official trip.
Okay, so your response to her, and you understand her frustration and feeling like her daughter was a constituent of yours, met a horrible end. That family didn't hear from you, and understand their frustration and that they see you extending so much time and energy over the Garcia case.
So what happened to the Morin family was awful and unacceptable. I cannot imagine losing a child like they lost Rachel. And I said at the time that my heart goes out to the Morin family. And I'm glad that the killer of Rachel Morin has been convicted in a court of law. That's how we hold guilty people accountable, in a court of law. Courts of law are also where people get their due process rights respected. As you indicated, there is zero connection between the horrible murder of Rachel Morin and the situation with Abrego Garcia. And I don't know if the Trump administration seems to be arguing that because of the awful thing that happened to Rachel Morin, that Abrego Garcia's right should be neglected.
I don't think that's not the question. I think it's about the mother being unable to understand why you would spend so much time and energy for this person who was not in your state or in the country legally, at which time she felt like you didn't have the same concern about her daughter and her family.
I did have concern. I have concern. My heart goes out to every Maryland family that is the victim of violence, regardless of the perpetrator. And that is why I am very glad, and said so, that a court of law has convicted her killer. That is where we litigate these issues. That is where the Trump administration admitted that they had wrongfully detained and deported Abrego Garcia. My whole point here is, if you deprive one man of his constitutional rights, you threaten the constitutional rights of everybody. I would hope that all of us would understand that principle. You're a lawyer. I'm not vouching for the individual. I'm vouching for his rights under the Constitution.
So just quickly then, if he is brought back, if the administration finally says, okay, we got a duty, let's get him back here, and he's given due process, then deported again, you're okay with that process? I
support the rule of law. That's exactly my point here. And if you threaten the rule of law for one person, you threaten it for everybody in America.
Well, we know it's been a whirlwind, so we thank you for taking time to come in. We appreciate
you.
it. Always good to see you, Senator.
You too.
This isn't about defending one individual, their character, their past, or anything else. This is about defending due process. That's always been the core issue. No matter what Donald Trump says, no matter how many headlines he misrepresents or photos he edits, the truth is simple. This man was denied due process. That's what this is about, full stop. And the idea that it's somehow a waste of taxpayer money for Senator Chris Van Hollen to ensure that a man, one of his own constituents, who was thrown into a prison in the middle of the night without cause or process, is safe and alive. That's absurd. But apparently, it's not a waste of taxpayer dollars when Kristi Noem poses for a photo shoot, or when Republicans exploit prisoners for tasteless performative stunts. That's when it's suddenly acceptable. And then there's the mother whose story has been shamelessly twisted and weaponized by the right, used as a prop, with no regard for her grief. It's disgusting, and it reveals what they truly care about, turning a human rights violation into a political game. But this isn't politics. It's about basic human rights. If you think it stops with this one man, you're wrong. They're coming for others next. And Jessica Tarlov nailed that point right here.
And that's what's going on here, and people are paying attention to it. I think that it is very clear that the public outrage over this and the fact that a U.S. senator showed up there has put pressure on Bukele and on the Trump administration. Because before, while they were, lounging around the Oval Office, patting each other on their authoritarian backs, saying, ha, 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 build more prisons.
Where's the outrage? What outrage?
The
Public outrage?
Yeah.
What? You're just reading news blogs, Jessica.
You think that the Supreme Court saying 9-0 that his return has to be facilitated, you think this Fourth Circuit opinion written by a Reagan appointee saying this should be shocking?
That's not public outrage.
Yes, Greg, I'm not just getting this off of some junk on my phone. If you look on the front pages of all of the major newspapers, if you look at every newscast and what they're leading with, it's this story. And you say you always pick one person. You say that to me frequently, and then I come back the next day with someone new. When I said there's a 54-year-old American man that was taken into ICE detention custody. Oh, one guy, he got returned, no big deal. Then I talk about Andre, the gay makeup artist, who, by the way, still has not been convicted of anything, and we don't know what's happened to him.
Going down there to try to get
Well,
him?
someone should, whatever
But why
state
would Chris Van Hollen, though, pick this guy? Why do you pick the MS-13 guy and not the gay makeup artist?
This isn't an MS-13 guy.
I can't stand this idea that the biggest conversation we should be having right now is about the politics of Senator Van Hollen's trip, the politics of standing up for Camargo Garcia, the politics around immigration. That completely misses the point. This isn't about politics. It's about right and wrong. And what's right and wrong here couldn't be clearer. What's unclear is just how far this will go if we don't stand up to it now. That's why we're speaking out. That's why we're going to keep calling it out on the show. And it's why we're going to keep urging elected Democrats to show the same kind of courage, to step up and take a stand. If you want to support that mission, hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, and if you made it all the way to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Until next time, see you soon.